this is James, and I'm here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting September the 4th, 2017. This week I wanted to work with Lenormand, so the deck that's going to be assisting me for this week's reading is the Mystical Lenormand. It is by Regula, Elizabeth Fiechter. The artwork is by Trӧsch, and it is published by AGM. So I have the cards on the table in front of me. I'm going to go ahead and start shuffling. And as I do for each one of these weekly general readings, I'm sticking with my basic intention and question, which is, what do we need to know for the week ahead? All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and cut the cards. And now fan them out. And when I work with Lenormand, I do a line of 5, so I'm looking for 5 cards in the line, which is going to be really easy. They are really getting my attention this week. All right, so I have the 5 cards picked out. And when I work with a line of 5, I always start with the middle card. For me, the middle card represents the central issue or what we're being asked to focus on for the week ahead. So here we have, this happens a lot when I use this deck. Okay, so here we have the heart card. So the heart card can represent things like love, it can represent romance. So that for some people, that may be a central issue this week. And what I love about this particular depiction of the heart's on fire. So it could be like somebody's got like burning desire for something of a romantic nature this week, or something having to do with their love lives this week. It's like they're on fire for it, right? So there's that. If you happen to be like me and you are unattached and you are not on the scene and you're not looking for romance, you're not looking for love, then for me this card can represent what it is that you're passionate about, what it is that you are enthusiastic about. It's like regardless whether it's an actual love or romantic relationship or not, this card is asking us to focus on what it is that we are passionate about this week. You know, what is it that sets our hearts on fire? And how can we go about doing that? Now the other thing here, and this could be whether it's a romantic relationship or not, you know, this could be about relationships just generally speaking, you know, the things that we are in love with in life. Then this card is about like taking a look at our love walk. You know, I always talk about our love walk. And so, you know, what's our capacity to be loving and caring people this week? You know, regardless of whether it's a primary, an intimate relationship, you know, or, you know, we're just dealing with people in our interactions in everyday experiences this week. It's how can we be more loving, you know, based on things that are going on. And this has just been my own personal take on things based on how I see things and how they're playing out in the world, you know. And you've heard me say this probably over the last few weeks now especially, but I talked about it in terms of healing, right? The world needs a lot of love. So it's like, how can we step up our love game this week? That's how I'm seeing that in Love Game. It just made me think of Lady Gaga. That's one of my favorite Gaga songs is Love Game. But how can we step up our love game this week, right? So again, heart is all about, you know, love and romance. You know, so how can we be more loving? You know, maybe some of us are actually going to be taking a look at our love lives. Some of us are going to be taking a look at our romantic relationships. You know, and then others of us who may not be, you know, romantically involved, and, you know, that's not a thing, that's not a concern for us. Then this card could be about taking a look at what it is that we're passionate and enthusiastic about this week. You know, but regardless, again, it's like, you know, what is it that's going to set our hearts on fire? You know, what is it that we have a burning desire to either do or accomplish this week? Because I'm feeling there may be a burning desire, right? So there's that with this card. So now, you know, if you are a Lenormand reader or you followed these videos long enough to know, you know, Lenormand is not read just by one card alone. We have to take the other cards into account. So now let's take a look at the surrounding cards because they're going to influence this center card. So the card on the far left is, okay, we have clouds. Then next in the line we have cross, okay. And on the other side of heart, we have anchor, okay. And then rounding out the line, we have rider. So this is very interesting. So we have two kind of challenging cards on the one side, and then two not so challenging cards on the other side. So this is going to be interesting to read. Okay, so when I'm looking at the line, what I do is I go one step out. So here on the left of heart, we have cross. So cross is a card that can represent difficulties and it can represent burdens, right? So for some of us, we may be going through a romantic relationship that has been difficult, that has been a bit of a burden, right? So there could be that. For some of us, that thing that sets our hearts on fire may have to do with our spirituality, because this card for me represents spirituality and it represents religion. So now here's the thing. Some of us could be really passionate about our spirituality, but we may have to be careful about getting over to the side where we become religiously or spiritually fervent. That kind of thing. It's one thing to be passionate, it's one thing to be enthusiastic, it's another thing to be, the word that's coming to me in the moment is like a zealot. That's a whole different ball of wax, right? So, but I'm thinking that the two pairs, cross and heart, if we read them as a pairing, then this could be an emotional difficulty. If we go with the heart, represents our feelings, our emotions, right? Then this could be an emotional burden or an emotional difficulty, right? It could also be a heartfelt or an emotional crisis or ordeal, because cross is a card for me that can represent a crisis or an ordeal, right? So it could be somebody's moving through a space where they're going through a critical time on an emotional level. So there's that with cross and heart. So now if we look at the other side, we have anchor. And it could be as a result of maybe that difficult experience, that crisis, that ordeal. On the other side of it is that there's a sense for wanting things to be stable, because anchor is all about stability and security, right? This card represents something that's not moving, something that's kind of fixed. So this could be about like a routine, having something that's a bit of a structure. Someone who may be wanting things to be a little more predictable. That goes with the sense of stability. Stability and routine. Some people like routine because it's predictable. Some people don't like to have a whole lot of upheaval and don't like to have a whole lot of change. They like routine. They like things to be stable. They want to know what's going on. That kind of thing. Now, this is, interestingly enough, this is a card that can also represent work. So for somebody may be in an emotional space, going with heart coming before this card, about what it is that they do with work. But I'm going to go with the sense, like maybe even from an emotional standpoint, somebody's wanting to feel more stable, wanting to feel more secure, right? So again, anchor is a card that can represent stability and security. I'm feeling like that's the go-to this week. I said feeling with heart right in the middle, so I said feeling. But that's my feeling, like this is about stability and security with this card. And then, if that doesn't resonate, then maybe you might want to think about, the idea about work. And going with that, I'm being reminded that anchor for me represents long-term work. It represents work that we've been doing a long time, or work that provides us this great sense of stability and security. So there's that. But I'm thinking that cross and anchor represent, a crisis that becomes stable. If we go with, the first card, cross, being what's going on, and then the second card represents what's becoming, what's moving towards, what's it going to be in the future, right? So it could be something that's critical, some sort of crises, some situation where we need to have faith or keep the faith. That's all cross energy to me. And then as a result of that, it does stabilize. It could also be too, for somebody too, they may need to have their faith not being shaken. Because I'm feeling like your immovable faith, like your faith is just like it's unlock. You're like, whatever's going on around you, you're not going to let it shake your faith. It's the best way I can put it this week. So there's that. Now if we go out to the outer cards, here we have clouds. Now clouds, for me, is the most challenging card in the deck because this card can represent confusion, it can represent uncertainty, it can represent trouble, things like that. And I'm going to say too, it could also be too, this card can represent atmosphere. If you go with clouds being in the sky, this could represent air, it can represent atmosphere. So it could actually be the literal air, literal atmosphere, the weather. It's making me think about the storm. We just had Hurricane Harvey here in the States, and Texas, unfortunately, has, been really hit hard to the point of devastation. So I'm thinking with clouds is like that. And then that would make sense with cross coming right after because it's a situation that's become critical. There are people who have lost their homes, all their belongings, and so there is a crisis. And for some people that may be, it could be a physical crisis, but it could also be a crisis of their faith. So I'm seeing that with these two cards. It's like, they're in this space of uncertainty. They don't know, but it's like it's become critical. So like, it could be too, going with the idea that this represents spirituality and religion. I'm talking about cross. Then this card represents spiritual confusion, spiritual uncertainty, spiritual doubt. There could be people who are, if you are a spiritual person, if you're a religious person and you have been impacted by this, you might be questioning that. Like, how does God, and this is a big question, I can't answer this, I'm just putting this out there. How can God let things like this happen? I mean, somebody could be in that space, or somebody who's not directly involved in watching it, maybe, watching it unfold, going like, I'm confused. I don't understand how these kinds of things can happen. And it may be something that's, questioning their faith. It could be a crisis of faith as a result of that. So that's just coming to me in the moment. And now moving to the other end of the line, we have Rider. Rider is a card that can represent news and messages, right? And usually represents the arrival of something, So it could be like news coming on the scene. So it could be like news coming in the future since it's at the very end of the line. And Rider is facing all the other cards, right? So it could be news pertaining to what I just talked about. But if we pair the outer cards, just like I paired the inner cards, then we have clouds, then we have Rider. So here we have uncertainty or confusion about news or a message. Or about confusion, uncertainty, doubt about something arriving in the future, right? So there's that. And so that, again, could be, the idea of those people who are challenged by Harvey and what's being left in his wake, and they're like uncertain about the future, and maybe they're wanting news or messages or information, and they're uncertain about that. There's no certainty about when that's going to come, whatever it is that they're waiting to arrive. There's no certainty about that. That's what's coming to me in the moment. If we look at Rider being really close to Anchor, right? So now we have these as a pair, right? So it could be, one way of looking at this could be like security and stability does arrive, going with the idea that Rider represents the arrival of something, It could also be to, the arrival of work. Somebody has work arrive. But I'm feeling like maybe with clouds being at the start of the line representing uncertainty, confusion, and doubt, maybe as time goes on, there is a greater sense of stability and security that comes into the situation, kind of thing. It could be like information comes in as to, getting things locked down, because I'm thinking about, the idea about like locking something down in terms of like getting an answer, that kind of thing. So, I'm feeling like information that's coming is going to help with this idea of like fostering a sense of stability and security. So I'm taking a step back and I'm looking at the cards. So I'm going to sum up the cards and maybe something else will come to me. Clouds at the start of the line represents confusion, uncertainty, it represents doubt, right? And then moving to the next card, cross. Cross represents a crisis or an ordeal, something that's difficult, something that's a burden. So there could be some uncertainty, some doubt, some confusion pertaining to a crisis or an ordeal. And again, I'm going to say that could be around, for some people, could be around the whole Harvey situation and where is that going to go from there. Could also be too, like it escalates, it becomes a very critical situation as time goes on. Now, with that in mind, heart takes on a different kind of meaning. It could also be too, with heart, it could be about like what can we do in terms of loving acts, you know, that kind of thing. For those of us who have not been directly affected or directly impacted, it could be about, like, again, I talked about stepping up our love game. How can we show the people who have been affected that we care? You know, how can we demonstrate that? You know, this is the week to do it. It could also be too, I'm going to bring this back down, maybe not make it so much about Harvey, but for some person, somebody may be, you know, questioning, you know, their spiritual path or their spiritual direction. You know, they want to have their heart set on fire in terms of maybe a spiritual experience or religious experience or something having to do with their faith. It could also be too, like, that somebody may be having a difficult time with a romantic relationship or a love relationship, and they're not sure about where that's going to go. It's been difficult, but they're not sure about, you know, where things are going to go. They're not sure where they stand, let's say, with that. And then we move to anchor, and anchor can be about stability and security. Whatever the issue is, this is about how can we create an environment that allows us a greater sense of stability and security. And it could also be too, somebody could be having a crisis or an ordeal that may have to do with work as well, if we pair a cross and an anchor, a work-related crisis or an ordeal, right? So there could be that. And then rider at the end of the line can represent something coming in, usually represents news or messages coming in. You know, it could also be about an arrival or a visit. So it could be like we receive some form of information, some news or message that maybe is going to help with this greater sense of security and stability, since rider is facing anchor. So I'm thinking, like, whatever the situation is, it may start out with some sort of uncertainty, we're not sure, but as time goes on, we get some form of information, some news, something that provides us a greater sense of stability and security. It could even be too, like, if somebody was thinking about, like, if somebody was either going to go somewhere or stay put, anchor could represent staying put. So on that note, I will end and wrap up this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm Jameson Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm wishing you a wonderful day, and I'm wishing you a wonderful week. Take care.